your views on the privatisation of the city ferry service?
Well, it can only be a disaster on many levels. I mean, for one thing, you'll see the end of public service. And I think people now realise just the true value of public service as the economy starts to melt down. I mean, in a way, that's the biggest example of what a disaster privatisation is, that public service as such never really implodes or melts down. It's a form of privatisation of capital. Now, if you bring that down to the Sydney ferries, you'll see an end to probably the most important thing about it, and that's the spirit of public service. I mean, the thing that I find really wonderful is when I get on the Cat at near where I live at Drummoyne Wharf, and there is a whole sense and an atmosphere of public service. People like myself, who are invariably late for just about everything, will rush down to the Cat and he'll come back. Now, I've watched him, it's not just for me, I've watched various skippers do that for other people. Now, that is a fantastic public service. Most of the time, the Cats are on time. Most of the time, the ferries are on time. There is a sense among the deckhands of helping people, of being almost proud to be part of it. I hope I'm not romanticizing it, because I don't think that's what it's about. It's about people being pleased to be part of a public service. That would go with privatization. Wages would come down. People would start to feel angry about their long hours, what they're earning, the whole sense of doing something for the community, which we don't have to spell out. And in Australia, we don't spell it out, and probably for good reasons. But that whole unspoken ethos would go. You'd have fewer services, no doubt. You'd have much talk about investing in the stock, investing in boats, investing in ferries, but there wouldn't really be any investment. We've seen now what has happened at bonds, with the CEO and her directors making off with $11 million while they get rid of a workforce, people leaving with a few thousand after a lifetime of work. That is the spirit, if it's the word, of privatization. Now, a very good example of the disaster is something that I know quite well, having lived in the UK, is, I mean, the railways, the first railways in the world were in Britain. Probably the most comprehensive and efficient railway service in the world was destroyed by Thatcher when she privatized the railways. Separate companies that competed against each other, separate companies for the tracks, people sat on boards making a fortune, trains don't run on time. All those things that used to be a proud feature of the railways in Britain have gone. They've become, to many people who use them all, a joke, a very black joke. And that's what happens to transport systems all over the world. If you take the United States had a wonderful network of railways quite a long time ago. And when all the companies merged and they were sold off and effectively privatized, the railway system collapsed. Now, I'm not saying that will happen in Sydney, but it will have a very, very grave effect on the overall transport structure. The Sydney transport system, for all its faults, works best when it's coordination of ferries, with buses, with trains. In my view, all it needs is investment, and that's all public service ever needs. We need new ferries, they need new rolling stock on the railways, perhaps new buses, investment.
What's your view on the recent victory by the Maritime Union with Bass and Flinders cruises? What's your view on that? Is that the thin part of the wedge? Is this where it all begins?
Yes. The Bass and Flinders victory was very important. I mean, it was quite, having seen how unions have been in recent years routinely defeated, it was very encouraging to see on a basic issue of public service that they could win, you know, where the union pointed out that the workers for Bass and Flinders were getting 25% less. They pointed out there were safety issues with these craft. All of these were very, very important for the commuters and, of course, for the workers themselves. So it was an important victory. But what was missing from that was a discussion about privatisation. And in many ways, I could, you know, the press made much of how commuters were angry and abused the pickets and so on. I'm sure that was exaggerated, but, you know, commuters need educating as well in their own interests. And that protest that was successful ought to have been tied to a wider campaign about privatisation. In fact, it seemed to almost be in isolation. And, you know, I've seen in various countries unions start off on the right foot and then, largely because of their close relationship, say with the governing Labour Party, they pull back. The leadership then says, well, perhaps we shouldn't upset them too much at the in the Trades and Labour Council, and this is particularly so in New South Wales. You see, I think this is a really excellent time for the union to mount a very imaginative, robust campaign about the ferries, because the penny has dropped for many, many people in this country and all over the world at what is happening. And they watch bankers being paid off, people taking bonuses at Pacific Brands. They watch workers being laid off. Why? There's no reason. They've worked in places all their lives. So I think people are being rapidly educated. They're becoming aware very quickly. It's a very, very good time to go straight to the public, address the campaign to the public. And the MUA has been successful already in doing that, in, for instance, boycotting the shipment of equipment to out of the country of Pacific Brands, and also in boycotting, as they did in Western Australia, Israeli goods coming into the country and going out again. You know, these campaigns, which have a moral base and touch all our lives and are important to all of us, need to be put into a wider context. In that, when people ask, as you know, I do plenty of meetings, and the most common question is, what can we do about this? Well, the answer is, here you are, the MUA is actually doing something about it, but it's got to really say that it's doing something about it, and it's got to appeal not just as as it did with the campaign about the Manly fast ferry, fast cat, which, as I say, was much more isolated. It's got to be broader than that, and it says to the public, where in many ways we're speaking not just for our members, we're speaking for all of you. If you look back, and I saw a newsreel recently of Jack Mundy talking about the green bans. He was a genius at explaining why it wasn't just about the Building Workers Union, it was about all our lives. It was about the quality of our lives. And I think Jack's genius at being able to explain that to many people and make it into a broad-based campaign, with the help of a lot of people, of course, I think that's what brought about the green bans. And this is just as important as the green bans.